I sat at my corner office desk, the city lights outside stretching like a river of fire and silver. My fingers traced the edge of my silk blouse as I scrolled through emails, the faint hum of my computer, the only sound besides the occasional beep of a notification. Life looked perfect from here, polished, in control, untouchable, but the truth was, I still carried fragments of old wounds in the quiet corners of my mind. And then my phone buzzed. A name popped up on the screen. Rachel Morgan. My heart skipped. Years ago, she had laughed at my offer, turned me down flat, and walked away without a second thought. And now, out of nowhere, here she was, sending me a meeting request. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking under my weight, and exhaled slowly. A strange mix of emotions washed over me. Irritation, curiosity, and that familiar sting of irony. The woman who had refused my help was now asking for what? Guidance? Opportunity? I allowed myself a small, private smirk. The room smelled faintly of espresso from the cup I had ignored this morning, and for a moment, I let myself savor the quiet. I adjusted the silver bracelet on my wrist, my reflection in the window showing a woman composed, confident, unshaken, and yet ready to confront the past that had once underestimated her. This was the moment, the one where things would finally change. Years earlier, I had been a different Samantha. Younger, eager, a little naive, and full of ideas that others didn't see the value in. I remember standing in the cramped conference room of my first internship, clutching a portfolio that represented months of work, my palms damp, my pulse racing. Across the table sat Rachel Morgan and a few other colleagues, leaning back casually, smirking like I was a child playing at ambition. "I don't see the point," Rachel had said, her voice sharp but dismissive. "We're fine without this. Stick to what you know." The words hit me harder than I expected. My throat tightened, and my hands shook as I tried to keep my composure. I wanted to argue, to prove her wrong right then and there, but I felt the weight of disbelief pressing in, the kind that comes from someone you respect underestimating you completely. I remember retreating to the small cafe on the corner afterward, my sketchbook open but untouched, my mind swirling. That day, a frail woman with silver-streaked hair approached my table. She was my grandmother's old friend, Mrs. Bennett, a retired entrepreneur who had once built a thriving company from scratch. "You're angry," she said gently, studying my eyes over her glasses. "Good. Let that fire drive you. But remember, success isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right." She reached into her bag and handed me a small notebook. Ideas need more than enthusiasm. They need strategy, patience, and courage. "Keep this. Fill it. When the time is right, you'll know what to do." That notebook became my secret weapon. Every late night, every doubt, every tear, I poured into it. Each page strengthened my resolve. If they didn't see my worth now, I would create a life so undeniable that even their skepticism would bow to it. The sting of rejection that day didn't break me, it lit a fire. I made a promise to myself. I would not just survive, I would thrive. And one day, those who had refused me would see exactly what they had missed. After that day in the cafe, I didn't look back. Samantha Hayes, the girl they dismissed, began building a life of her own, brick by brick. I rented a tiny apartment in a bustling part of the city, the kind with cracked sidewalks and the smell of fresh bread from the corner bakery. My days blurred into nights as I juggled multiple jobs, each one teaching me a lesson, each one a step toward independence. One evening, exhausted and half-finished with my freelance pitch, I got a call from a woman named Claire Donovan, a seasoned entrepreneur in the tech world. Her voice was crisp but kind, full of the kind of confidence I craved. "I've heard about your ideas," she said. "You have potential. I'll mentor you, but you'll need to work harder than you ever imagined." I swallowed my pride and agreed. That was the start of something that would transform my life. Claire pushed me, challenged me, forced me to confront my own doubts. There were days when I wanted to quit, when I questioned if I was good enough, smart enough, capable enough. But I kept writing in the notebook Mrs. Bennett had given me, Each entry a reminder that I was building more than a career. I was building proof. Little victories began to pile up. My first client, a boutique brand that trusted me with their campaign, sent a thank you note that made me cry in my small kitchen. My first profitable sale, the first recognition from an industry magazine, even small mentions on social media, all of it became threads in the tapestry of my hidden success. I learned to master the art of subtlety. No posts bragging about milestones, no stories about my accomplishments. The outside world saw modest updates, but behind closed doors, my empire was quietly growing. Every project I led, every contract I signed, was another brick in the foundation of the life they had refused to help me build. By the time I turned 29, I had not only established a thriving consultancy, but had also acquired shares in several startups, quietly building influence and wealth. I moved into a luxurious yet tasteful apartment overlooking the skyline, where the city felt alive beneath my feet, a reminder of how far I'd come. And yet, despite the quiet triumphs, I kept the secret to myself. My success was mine, a shield against the people who had once doubted me, a reminder that their opinions had never defined my potential. Every morning, as I adjusted my blazer and sipped coffee by the window, I allowed myself a private smile, a small, victorious acknowledgement that the girl they refused to help was now unstoppable. The knock on my office door was deliberate, confident. I knew exactly who it would be before I even glanced at the visitor log. Rachel Morgan, the same woman who had dismissed my ideas years ago, and a few of her colleagues trailing behind her. Their expressions were a mix of curiosity and polite skepticism, the kind people wear when they think they're stepping into someone else's modest success story. I rose from my desk, the silk of my blouse brushing against my skin, and walked toward the door, my heels clicking on the polished hardwood. My office, my sanctuary, was immaculate. Abstract paintings on the walls, shelves lined with books that had guided me through sleepless nights, and awards I had quietly earned stacked neatly in glass cases. A bronze statuette from my first major campaign glimmered in the corner, catching the soft light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. They stepped inside, their eyes sweeping the room. I let them look, let them take in the subtle details, the leather-bound notebooks, the framed articles praising my consultancy, the city skyline glittering behind me. They had expected a struggling dreamer. Instead, they found someone in command, someone who had built her own kingdom quietly, meticulously. Emily, Rachel started, hesitating. Then she corrected herself under her breath, Samantha. I offered a polite smile, gesturing for them to sit. Welcome, I said softly, letting the calm in my voice contrast sharply with the storm of anticipation I knew was rising in their minds. I paused, watching their faces, letting the tension settle. And then I spoke, slow, deliberate. You may remember years ago, I approached some of you with a proposal, an offer to collaborate, to grow together. It was refused. I let the words linger in the air. That refusal didn't stop me. I took a different path, one that led here. I motioned toward the documents on my desk, contracts, partnership agreements, a clear representation of my ownership and net worth. This company, these ventures, all of it is mine. I built it, from the ground up, alone. Their reactions were immediate. Rachel's jaw tightened, her eyes widening in disbelief. One of her colleagues whispered, almost to themselves, she did it. The shame, the surprise, the sudden recognition of their own misjudgment, it hung in the air like thick fog. I let them take it all in. Every pause, every glance at the awards, every acknowledgement of the success they had once refused to be part of. And then, finally, I smiled, the kind of smile that comes from quiet victory rather than vindictiveness. You see, I continued, my voice calm but firm, the offer I made back then was genuine. But life has a funny way of proving lessons. Today, you are here, seeking opportunities that I once offered freely. And now, you will see what it means to work under someone who refused to be underestimated. I could feel the tension shift. The balance had changed. I was no longer the one seeking approval, no longer the one vulnerable to their dismissal. The tables had turned, and this time, I held the power. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the moment settle over the room. The air was thick with disbelief, but also a subtle, unspoken hope. They had come seeking guidance, and now I held the keys, not out of spite, but because I had earned the right to lead. "I can help," I began, my voice steady. "But things will be different this time. If you want to work with me, if you want to be part of this team, it's not just about skills or connections. It's about growth, integrity, and commitment." Rachel shifted uncomfortably, her usual arrogance replaced by curiosity tinged with humility. I met her gaze directly. "You'll need to leave behind the patterns that got you here, the dismissiveness, the shortcuts, the tendency to undervalue others." One by one, I laid out the conditions for each of them. For some, it was accountability, weekly updates, measurable progress, tangible results. For others, it was attitude, openness to mentorship, willingness to learn, respect for collaboration. And for Rachel, specifically, it was reflection and humility, learning to acknowledge when she was wrong and to embrace the strengths of those around her. I emphasized the core principle behind every requirement: growth. "I'm not here to punish anyone," I said, letting warmth edge my tone. "I'm here to build something meaningful. And that means every member of this team must be willing to rise to the challenge, to evolve, and to respect the journey that got us here." I watched as they absorbed the gravity of my words, realizing that this wasn't a negotiation. It was an opportunity. They could step into it fully or step back. And the power dynamic was clear. The choice was theirs, but the terms were mine. A quiet satisfaction settled in me, a soft, confident hum of triumph that had nothing to do with revenge. This was not about making them suffer. It was about setting boundaries, reclaiming space, and ensuring that the lessons of the past were honored. By the time the meeting ended, the air had shifted. They were no longer the ones in control, no longer dismissing, no longer unaware of their own limitations. They were beginning to understand what it meant to work under someone who had proven herself against every obstacle, someone who led with both strength and empathy. And as they filed out, tentative but willing, I allowed myself a private, triumphant smile. This was not just power, it was balance, earned the hard way. Weeks passed, and I watched quietly as Rachel and the others began to change. Their emails became more thoughtful, their questions more genuine, their efforts more deliberate. I saw them grow, not overnight, but in small, meaningful ways, learning patience, showing respect, and embracing challenges they once avoided. It was rewarding in a way I hadn't expected, to witness transformation without demanding it, to guide without controlling. I sat in my office one evening, the city lights flickering below, sipping my tea, and reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The sting of rejection, the sleepless nights, the moments of doubt, all of it had shaped the woman I had become. Samantha Hayes was no longer the girl whose ideas were dismissed. She was a leader, a creator, someone whose strength and vision were undeniable. From my desk drawer, I pulled out the small notebook Mrs. Bennett had given me years ago. Its pages were worn, filled with sketches, strategies, and reminders of perseverance. I smiled, tracing the handwriting on the first page. "Prove yourself right." That advice had guided me through every setback, every struggle, and every triumph. I realized then that true power wasn't in proving people wrong or exacting revenge. It was in resilience, in nurturing growth, in turning past pain into fuel for success, and in extending opportunities to those willing to rise alongside you. Looking out at the skyline, I felt a sense of closure. I had faced the past, transformed it, and now moved forward unburdened. The people who had refused me were no longer obstacles, but collaborators, partners who had earned their place through effort and humility. And as I adjusted my bracelet, feeling the cool silver against my wrist, I whispered to myself with quiet confidence. I didn't just survive. I became the woman I was meant to be, strong, graceful, unstoppable.